Greetings and a warm welcome from Aster Wynad family. I'm Tessa Shelley, Junior Resident of Aster Wynad. Improvement of health status of the people is one of the crucial areas in the development of a community. In our state, the foundation for a medical care system accessible to all citizens have been laid since time immemorial. And with this strong base, Kerala have been able to show a way or stand out in dealing with the present pandemic COVID-19. Kerala, which was at one point showed the highest number of cases in India, was now able to flatten the curve with its sophisticated surveillance, detection, isolation, and treatment strategies. If we look into some statistics for support, Kerala has reported less than 10 new cases each day since the beginning of this month. It has shown a recovery rate of 63%, which is higher than the national average. Moreover, we have also been able to bring down the mortality rate. With all these achievements, it have enabled us to get recognition both nationally and internationally. Or in other words, it have encouraged people to adopt the Kerala model of healthcare system. On this note, we once again welcome everybody to today's topic of discussion, dealing with COVID-19, the Kerala model of comprehensive care. Since we are live, along with this, we'll be also answering some of the queries that come along the way. To discuss this, we have with us the frontline team members of the COVID cell unit of Aster Wynad. I welcome Dr. Wasif Main MC, Consultant Internal Medicine. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I also welcome Dr. Jasin Kumar C, Consultant Pulmonologist, Aster Wynad. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, to begin with, could you please elaborate on the Kerala model of comprehensive care?
Yeah, basically, greetings to everybody. So, the much has been spoken about the Kerala model of dealing with things actually. To talk on a primitive basis, we had learned a lot of lessons from the previous Nipah outbreak that we had. So we had learned our lessons, and basically we had a structure in place to deal with any emerging pandemic. So Kerala model is being appreciated worldwide, even Western media, even the newspapers. I have just gone through a few newspapers, the Washington Post, New York Times, and even the Guardian, etc. from the UK. They have all appreciated the work that we are doing, and they have broadly termed it as a Kerala model of doing things. So Kerala model is actually not just a healthcare initiative or anything. It is just it could be an amalgamation of the various measures taken up by the entire departments, not only health department, mainly the law enforcement agencies, the food and supply chain department, the transportation department, and the people of Kerala. They are the most crucial or the vital cog in this system actually. The Kerala model basically is dealt with the old Panchayati Raj system that we had in our India actually. So the primary aim of that is decentralization of healthcare. It's not a centralized initiative from anybody actually. Everybody is part of the healthcare system, and it involves involvement of even the private institutions, of which Aster Wynad, being in our institution, we have played a major role in a district like Wynad, where we are comparatively one of the rural most districts in Kerala. So it basically involves the treatment decisions as well as the law enforcement decisions as well as administrative decisions taken at multiple levels. So we have a graded system of healthcare. We have established a lot of infrastructural as well as operational guidelines and we constantly update on a day-to-day basis. And the most important thing is there is a very valid discussion going on a regular basis on this regard, which makes the system to function in a very good way. So it is not just a healthcare initiative actually. It's like it's an
integrated approach actually.
Exactly.
So, sir, could you please break into breaking points and tell what are the roles mainly played by the law enforcement areas or the call centers? We have a service call centers.
So the primary thing is, we basically wanted, because we have turned the topic of the day as comprehensive healthcare. So what makes up comprehensive also we need to find it out. So what law enforcement is like, the basic structure is, the essence of the whole in a Kerala model is like, you want to give comprehensive care for every patient. We should not forget the vast majority of non-COVID population, and even among the COVID population, we don't want a local transmission to happen. So the basic essence of a call center is, if at all a person develop some symptoms which are suggestive of COVID, like fever, sore throat, and some kind of dizziness or tiredness, he has easy access to multiple call centers which are established in every district. So he can, it is a toll free number, and they can easily access the toll free number and get connected to various call center operators who will guide them as to how to go about in dealing with things. And now what generally happens is, whenever a call is going, what happens is the message will be conveyed to the district surveillance level officers and certain epidemiologists who are in those area, who will be following the patient, and they will be giving guidance to the patient as to how to reach a hospital. For example, what we were doing is, like, the local the primary health centers, the ambulance drivers were trained, and those trained drivers were given expert advice, and they'll be given directive how to bring a patient and to assess the risk. And after this initial risk assessment is made, we'll decide to transport the patient to whatever facility that requires. And we have had a hierarchy system of transporting the patients. We have a four-tier system, which maybe we can elaborate also. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the four-tier system basically deals with the initial center. We have identified it as it's like it's a pyramid actually. And we are proud to say that in Wayanad district, at least, we are at the apex of that pyramid actually, being the tertiary care center catering to the needs of these advanced illnesses which are related to COVID, etc. So the base of the pyramid is actually lined by something called as a COVID care center. Now, COVID care center can be anything. It could be a hotel, or it could be a hostel dormitory setup or something which has isolated single rooms where a suspected COVID patient or a corona suspecting patient can be isolated. Now, above that, you have a COVID first line treatment center. Now, what is a first line treatment center? These are basically small scale hospitals or small scale primary healthcare centers where you can actually treat patients of COVID with mild to moderate symptoms. Let's say somebody is having some cough and breathlessness, or some amount of early amount of breathlessness, not amounting to a very severe breathlessness, but very minimal symptoms. We need to isolate those patients from the common public. So they have treatment centers called as first line treatment center. Now, the third tier is the medical colleges or the tertiary centers or the COVID hospitals actually. To be more precise, it's COVID hospital. Now, this COVID hospital has designated ICUs and designated isolation wards and rooms which are equipped to treat only COVID cases. Okay. Now, we as Aster Wayanad and WIMS, we are above that in the apex of the pyramid in the fourth level, being the tertiary care center. Now, tertiary care center is basically a medical college which has the very sophisticated facilities, including super specialty care in the form of cardiology, because we have COVID patients developing heart failure. We have COVID patients developing renal failure and kidney injury, etc. So they may need multiple specialties, multidisciplinary approach to treat these kind of patients. So that is the essence. Now we have a peculiar situation in Wayanad. Now the Wayanad situation is, comparatively, when you compare all the other districts in Kerala, we are the only medical college in Wayanad, and we are the only tertiary care center in Wayanad. So that makes it difficult actually, because when you compare the COVID versus non-COVID patients, we need to actually treat and cater the needs of both these populations.
Is there any special approach Aster Wayanad is following?
Exactly, yeah.
So
we have a very specific approach. We have made a standard operating protocol, and the basic protocol that we designed is to cater the needs of both the COVID as well as the non-COVID regular population. Now, what we have designed is, we have designed separate isolation blocks and isolation wards for receiving these COVID patients. And what we have generally done is, we have had a dedicated ICU of, which can have the ability to connect even up to 35 ventilators. So such an exhaustive ICU we have designed, and even the ICU is divided into 4 different smaller ICUs, where you don't want to keep a suspected COVID patient and a confirmed COVID patient together. So we have 2 separate, something called as an SARA ICU, or a severe acute respiratory illness ICU, and a COVID confirmed ICU. And then we have isolation blocks and isolation wards where the COVID confirmed patients can get their own dedicated care, along with a dedicated healthcare faculties. The doctors working in different units are different. We don't merge the COVID pool of doctors with the non-COVID pool. And the medical college setup as the Aster Wayanad, we are running it separately with a separate pool of doctors who don't mix with the COVID patients. That is what we have done in order to ensure that the comprehensive care of non-COVID patients are also not affected.
Sir, can I ask one doubt? Like, so
Yeah.
people should not be afraid to come to hospitals which have been designated as COVID centers?
Exactly. That's the crux of it actually. See, we have most districts, we have COVID hospitals which are designated facilities. And now I have just given you the flow chart. The thing is like they are coming through the call centers, they'll be transported by designated ambulance drivers, and we have a separate entrance to the COVID facility, and the exit is also separate. It is cordoned off from the public. We ensure that these patients don't come in contact with the regular population. So the non-COVID pool, the normal OPD entrances, normal casualty entrances are all generally free of this thing. And that is where I would like to highlight the role of public in this. People are very cooperative. That makes the Kerala model a success.
Yes, this
they
was possible only because of the support they have, or
exactly,
consideration they have shown to us.
exactly, yeah.
So, could you please tell the role of the public have played in this integrated approach, or helping build up this?
The role of the public is actually probably the most crucial part in this puzzle, as far as we are concerned. As we all are, we are all aware of the various measures that we are supposed to take. So, but just plain awareness of the measures is not going to serve any purpose. We should also follow these measures like social distancing and staying at home, all these hand washing, wearing a mask. So all of these measures had to be followed. And with terms of Kerala, we had a slight advantage as compared to the other states because we were in a mini lockdown before the national lockdown. In the sense, our chief minister had asked us to refrain from social gatherings or from going to religious places and things like that. So in a sense, we were sort of prepared for a national lockdown. And so when it happened, all the people were very receptive to the idea and they were able to follow the measures that were expected from them. So that is the most important role as far as the public was
I
concerned.
think we could only achieve this because the thought that they also put behind it. They thought not only they should be safe, but also in order for them to be safe, all others also should.
Exactly. We have kept aside politics and all in this. We have united in this endeavor. And the most important thing is our health department and the doctor population. We have taken up steps necessarily early actually. Like we were aggressively testing, and even in Wayanad, we were the institution to start testing the population of Wayanad at the earliest actually. So we did not charge anything for these patients. We were doing as a part of our duty as a tertiary institution in this district actually. So as and when three medical students, incidentally they happen to be medical students who returned from Wuhan. By that time actually there were no reported cases in the entire of India as well. Even at that time we had started to test aggressively. We had started to formulate uh, something called as geo mapping, as well as uh, drawing lot of something what we have called it as flow diagrams and route maps. So route maps are something which are basically following up the contacts of everybody. Like even when there were no COVID cases in India, we had formulated route maps of those medical students who had come from Wuhan, and we were the institution to actually start doing testing in Wayanad districts in liaison with the government instructions. So government was supplying. That is the other part of it, the decentralization and the public-private the partnership actually. We had a decentralized system wherein there is free communication between the public as well as the private healthcare systems like ours. So we work in coordination with them. We communicate on a daily basis. We take part in the district level meetings conducted by them, and we put in all efforts that we have, and we have given utmost care to these patients. So we were aggressively taking and testing patients much before we have had much positive cases as well. So even at an earlier stage we were very vigilant, and primarily this was because of the lessons that Nipah taught us actually. We had dealt with that.
We had a strong base actually.
Exactly. So we had something to work with actually. We were not clueless in the beginning. We had something, a structure was in place. These kind of infrastructure, how to go with the 4-tier system, the starting of helpline numbers and call centers. We had a prototype actually to follow, and that made it a lot easier.
So since we are live, we'll take some questions, sir.
Sure.
Um, we have one question. Like patients with asthma, what are the extra precautions should they take? Or let's put it broader way, those all with chronic respiratory infections, what are the precautions that they should take?
Well, the first thing that people have to be aware of is the symptoms of COVID. So the main thing people are concerned about is, do they have COVID? So that is the primary concern. So the primary symptoms that we generally hear about is fever, cough, and breathlessness. These are the most common symptoms, and generally some tiredness, some lethargy. That's very common. So as far as people with chronic respiratory illnesses are concerned, they should continue taking their medications, despite what they hear on social media, WhatsApp, whatever. They should take their medications unless they are advised by their doctor not to do so. And if possible, a little bit of stockpiling, like keeping their medicines in stock for like a month, because we have a lockdown. We never know what can happen. That will be advisable. And social distancing, besides this, all the normal measures, social distancing, staying at home, and maintaining good
So
diet.
there are no
right,
extra
exercise.
precautions that they should take. They should keep
Yeah.
the social distancing, wear mask, sanitize their hands. So usual measures itself they can take. There are no extra measures, but they should be aware like everybody.
And the other thing that we've tried to do right now, what sir has been talking about, is we've been trying to allay their fears. That if they have a symptom and if they feel that it warrants coming to a hospital, they shouldn't hesitate, because we have specific systems in place to make sure that COVID patients don't come in contact with non-COVID patients. So if they have symptoms of persistent cough and breathlessness, and if they think that they need professional help, they can always come to the hospital. There's no problem with
There
that.
is no need to be afraid to approach hospital when in need. There is no mixing up of COVID patients or suspects with the non-COVID or the normal public who come to the hospital. Sir, with this, can I ask one question? Like, how do we differentiate between this COVID and non-COVID symptoms? Or like cough or general tiredness are the symptoms commonly showed by COVID suspects also. So how can we differentiate whether, or how can a person know that he doesn't have COVID? It's only other minor ailments.
Yeah, so thing is now, because we are in the early stage of the disease, like it's not gone into the stage 3 and community spread. One of the primary things that we can use to identify if you have COVID is, besides the normal symptoms of fever, cough, and breathlessness, is whether this patient has been in one of the hotspots, or if he has been in contact with a person who is a confirmed COVID case. That is one of the predominant symptoms. And with respect to other viral illnesses, it's actually very difficult to differentiate a COVID illness from the other viral illnesses. But there are some symptoms like loss of taste, loss of smell, which are kind of specific for COVID. So, but right now the best way for us to go about would be: has there been a contact with a confirmed COVID case, or is the patient hailing from a hotspot? That would be.
So we can watch out for the peculiar symptoms, but also if you have a close contact with a confirmed COVID case, definitely they should approach a hospital.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. Sir, then some of the questions that we have got from Harpal Singh. Like, what can other states like Maharashtra learn about flattening the curve?
That's what actually in the crux of flattening the curve lies with preventing local transmission. Once when local transmission has happened in a community, it's very difficult to actually start flattening the curve. Now, the most important thing in flattening the curve, what you mean by flattening the curve is like you stop the progression of the disease. You stop people contracting the disease. Now, contracting the disease and communicating the disease to others can be prevented only by isolating and finding all the cases. You should not miss out on any case. Now, that cannot be implemented by the decision of some hospitals or some doctors or anybody. That lies with the decisions taken by a public level as well as a governmental level in instituting strict isolation measures for whoever are at risk. Now, that is where all this route mapping and all this contact tracing lies. The whole essence of contact tracing is that we have a huge team of people working and volunteering in order to trace the contacts. Whenever somebody comes with a history of contact, we trace down all the other people who have had a potential contact. Now, without revealing the identity of certain people or whoever has been positive, we generally publish the route maps. For example, such a person who got confirmed as COVID yesterday or day before yesterday happened to actually spend 1 hour in such and such supermarket or something like that. And generally, the whole purpose of publishing this route map is that if you happen to actually spend some time in the supermarket exactly at the same time that the suspected patient spent, you are supposed to seek some help. You have to call through this landline, this number actually. The Disha is what we have termed it as, and you can have all this in a help, and your contacts will be traced, and you will be always advised quarantine. As and when you develop symptoms, you come to a very specific exclusive room where you are not in contact with any other population. So the flattening of the curve implies you want to isolate and find out every potential person who is likely to have got COVID. We should not be missing them, and they should not be missing their disease, because you have a lot of people who do not have typical symptoms of COVID, but at the same time they may be infective. They may have some type of some stickiness in the throat, or some foreign body kind of sensation in the throat. They may not even have fever at all, but they may be transmitting.
Yes.
So we need to pick up those kind of people, and that needs help from everybody actually. It needs help from the law enforcement agency, it needs help from a district administration and the state administration as well as the central administration level, and it needs help from the people as well, because people should cooperate actually. That is the essence of Kerala model actually. That is what the partnership, and you need to decentralize it. It's not like when you have a symptom, you are suspected, you definitely have to go in a government health facility or something like that. Every facility, every doctor, every public or private practitioner is being sensitized, and they are all part of this system. That is what makes it a success story, and that is what has helped in flattening the curve.
Once again, we came to the integrated approach.
Yeah.
We only was able to achieve
Exactly.
this. Because
Yeah.
one question that can be clubbed with it, is it too late for the other states to adapt? I think it's better late
It's
than
actually,
never.
yeah, and a thing is better late than never. Actually, it's better to actually start acting at whatever time that you are, rather than not acting at all actually. Certain states are definitely, like somebody, I think the person who have asked the question is probably from Maharashtra. So, and because states like he happened to actually quote Maharashtra by name. You are sure that local transmission has happened, but it's not so late in not acting at all. You still can actually cordon off the so-called hotspots. You will be having definitive hotspots, like there will be a cluster of maybe, let's say, some 100 houses where there will be, you can still be in cordoning that area, and you can probably act in that area wherein you will have to probably make all these facilities, like even foods, like making supplying of food rations 3 times a day with adequate precautions, and ensuring law enforcement agency to ensure that further people do not actually get into the area, and whoever are in those areas do not come out also. So that is a whole purpose of isolation. Now we could to an extent actually prevent a local transmission from happening, and whenever it has happened, especially in Kasaragod and Pathanamthitta districts, we could contain it primarily because of this route mapping and contact tracing. Now if it has happened at a larger scale in Maharashtra or some other states, we can actually still act right now. It's not too late actually, and we cannot say that we have achieved something. Okay, what I consider is that we have just cleared the quarter final or something like that. Now the semi-final match will be like when you ease the restrictions, how do we do it? That is another match or another competition that we are going to probably face in the next thing. And the final would be like, when are we going to see a phase where we are not going to see much of COVID cases? So it's not like we have achieved some victory or anything. The curve has flattened. That is the first part of it. So you have probably cleared this quarter final. Now you have a semi-final and a final ahead.
Sir, on that note, actually, we got a question from Paul Matthew. He have asked, a partial relaxation of the lockdown, can it turn dangerous, or
that is what actually it is it's a very tricky situation actually. Without relaxing the lockdown, our economy is probably suffering a lot actually. Worldwide economies, GDPs everywhere, it's suffering primarily because of this epidemic and because it's in a pandemic proportion. Now easing the restrictions, it has to be done actually, because in order for our country to move ahead, we need the restrictions. But the problem is how far the public is willing to cooperate in this setting. Like if at all they have symptom or something like that, they have to volunteer themselves out of the and they have to distance themselves out. That is something which could come only from the participation of the public in this, because it cannot be blamed on the healthcare system in place or the governmental measures in place. Government has to uh, relax a bit at some point in time when the curve is flattening. But the primary message, what I think, is like the relaxations should happen only when the curve is flat. That is where the government lies at this. We have set guidelines from the government how to relax. There should not be any cases reported in the last 14-day period in order for the restrictions to be relaxed in that particular district. It should be done in a cluster level basis or a district level basis. It cannot be implemented on a pan-India level or something like that. Okay. It may turn out to be dangerous if it is suddenly relaxed.
That depending on the density of the cases or how can it be tackled, we have to
we'll have to move ahead accordingly.
Sir, can I cut in another question? Like in the present situation, we are asking people to stay home. Even health professionals are asking people to stay home. In that situation, if they come across any minor ailments, can they avail the facility of telemedicine? Like, can they call?
Telemedicine is something which is very promising prospective. It has been started and it's been in practice in Western countries. Our medical association and our medical council has not technically we have started to implement that actually. Telemedicine is a good facility. There are two types of telemedicine which I can tell. One type is like the social media platforms, like we are using WhatsApp and WhatsApp video calls and video conferencing to actually deal with patients on a face-to-face basis. Now that is something which we had taken a leap in Wayanad actually. We were among the first institutions to start doing telemedicine with our help of the IT department here. We have started telemedicine. What we have set up is like separate sitting areas wherein they can call the hospital number and the concerned consultant can be made available to them. That is what we had taken. We are proud to say that we have taken steps in that direction as well, much earlier than this was implemented on a very broad level. So telemedicine is advantageous. The only problem in telemedicine is like you do not actually have the ability to directly examine the patient, and lab testing, like for example if a person requires some lab testing, it becomes a problem. Now that is the second part of telemedicine. Now what we are trying to implement is a novel idea wherein you can actually keep a patient consulting room with a video camera inside the hospital with audio recording support, and the second part of it is the doctor can be made available in a separate room which can be his OPDs. Now those patients with minor ailments at risk, like for example he is having some at risk of some small amount of sore throat or something with a suspicion, he can actually be uh, taken into a lab facility in the same hospital as the patient has already landed up in a hospital in a separate setting. The doctor is in the hospital, patient is in the hospital, but they are in two separate rooms, and it works kind of like a telemedicine. And the patient can be evaluated and investigated with adequate protection if needed. The risk can be assessed inside that room itself, and the patient can be given advanced care. So that is a novel way of adapting telemedicine, is what I feel.
I think Aster Wayanad have shown a good example in
Exactly. We could actually taken all these measures because we have been equipped by a very good IT department, and in that we have been able to take a lead in that regard.
So telemedicine is never harm. I think that
It's
can be
never
the
harmful
message.
actually because if it is done in a very proper way with an adequate access to a healthcare professional, I think nobody takes a risk of proceeding towards treating somebody without a broad evidence or anything. Everybody can actually assess the risk and calculate the risk based on a video conversation or a chat with the person face to face. And let's say somebody has a skin problem, you can always show pics of your skin lesions and you can get a treatment from a dermatologist. That makes sense actually. It's not much of a problem for a patient either.
So at this era where technology is this much advanced, I think
Yeah.
we should utilize the
We should be utilizing and we should be going ahead with that.
So we'll take some questions. Sir, there was like in September, some news about the development of vaccines for this have come out. Is this credible news or is this reliable?
See, the thing is, we have lot of coronaviruses. Okay, so coronavirus is a group of viruses, RNA viruses, and we have had previous coronavirus outbreaks. Okay, the first one was SARS, and we have had MERS in our era actually, because we have had previous. This is the seventh type of coronavirus actually that has come to a pandemic proportion. So, in that regard, vaccines have been in development for MERS actually, and this coronavirus has more resemblance to the SARS actually. So it has been termed as SARS-CoV coronavirus 2 actually. So whether vaccines are of potential benefit is in something which can be debatable, and it cannot be assured. The September news was exactly about the MERS coronavirus vaccine actually. So there is a vaccine in development in phase 4 trials for MERS coronavirus, and probably the last case of MERS was reported somewhere in 2017. And whether this will be of benefit in COVID is something which we need to, which we can say only after further experimentations can be done in this, or somebody has to be undergoing trial.
Cross our fingers for it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, sir. One news that related to people who have taken BCG vaccine have some protection against this. How do you take this?
Yeah, there are some studies that people who've taken BCG vaccines have some protection. It's primarily because the places where we see a high mortality rate, like say the US and in Italy. These are countries that have never had a universal BCG vaccination program. And on the contrary, the countries which have had a BCG vaccination program are experiencing few rates. So that is the reason behind this theory. And at the same time, there are countries like Iran where previously they had a universal BCG vaccination program. So the older population are not having that higher mortality rate as compared to the younger population. So that's the reason why this BCG vaccination thing came in vogue. But having said that, the vaccination is actually it's being fast tracked. I think probably in another one and a half years we should be able to see a vaccine. Like
So based on some statistical approach, it is said that
that is
There
BCG
could be a lot of
protected.
factors here, is what I feel, because we happen to hypothesize the hygiene hypothesis. Okay, being a developing country, we are exposed to actually lot of pathogens in our early life itself. We don't have that kind of strict hygiene measures implemented or in place in every household on a regular level. So we are exposed to multiple infections in our childhood itself. So that could activate our adaptive and innate immune response at a higher level. So the probably the survival chances may improve. These are all postulates or maybe hypotheses. We can never say whether it is actually true or like whether it has a sense in protecting us or anything, and whether vaccination played a role is something which needs further analysis, and we need to await further studies actually.
Sir, so we have reached so much success in this, like dealing with COVID. So, but are we in front in doing enough tests, or are we conducting enough tests for this?
See, we have our resource limitations. So, are we under testing? We had this doubt because I was part of the COVID team in that, and I am still am. So, we had this doubt that are we missing out on local transmission or local transmission cases. So, we conducted an analysis between cases actually. We had a early statistic from Wuhan actually. They were testing like around 85 to 90 percentage of the contacts based on contact tracing. They were testing 80 percentage of the samples, and among them the sample positivity rate from the contacts was something like 2.5 percentage to 8 percentage in different studies, because that was the only data that was available at that point of time. We did that analysis some 3 weeks back, and we were grossly under testing in terms of the statistics that China or countries like the Western countries could achieve. We were grossly limited in our numbers. But the thing that we observed was we were doing some smart testing actually. We trace the contacts and we assess the risk of the contact. In our resource limited setting, what we did was we analyzed the risk. We had a team of doctors, like even at a district level, myself and probably the district surveillance officer, the district medical officer, everybody worked in tandem in coordination. The risk of the patient. We clinically assessed the patient and decided whether this patient needs testing or not. So when the risk was low, we had to, because at that time we were having limited testing facilities. Now we are trying to build upon those infrastructure. Now the testing facilities have increased. So now we are not taking that risk. We have started to increase the number of testing that we are going to do. But if you take, we have a very large population to cater. So if you go by number of tests done per 1 million population, we are far behind. But that is the importance of Kerala model as well, in being in a core topic of our discussion. What we have implemented is we are not randomly testing. We are testing based on a needs basis.
Priority basis.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Sir, with that, there are some rapid testing kiosks that have been set up in some districts.
Yeah.
Should everyone be subjected to testing, or is those who
everybody with symptoms can probably go in, and the PCR, it takes a lot of time for us, and it is expensive at this time. So what the government is trying to do is anybody with a potential symptom, we have to save on our PP. The primary objective is not to like waste lot of PP just for testing purposes. Now with this setting of such a kiosk, what happens is with one personal protection equipment, a healthcare professional can swab multiple number of people without ensuring by ensuring adequate protection measures to the patient as well. We are not contaminating. The gloves get changed, only the kiosk is same. So in that way we are doing the maximum. We are trying to achieve maximum care without compromising on our limited resources, and that is being adapted by multiple states. That is something which is also a Kerala model.
Again, a smart approach
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
So we'll answer some questions. That is actually a worry from Poonam Rao. She have told, is it a good idea to continue the lockdown after the 3rd May? Or isn't this having a huge economical impact of our
That is what I think we have addressed to this question. It is definitely having a huge economic impact. And the problem is even in mobilizing the resources, like even in getting hold of these personal protection equipment, medical supplies, and all this kind of thing. The lockdown, basically because of this lockdown, what that was the other part of our discussion. Many people are refraining from actually even uh, trying to approach a healthcare facility. Now the people have a sense of assurance that when you stay at home, you are totally safe, and they have this false ideation that hospitals are probably the hotspots for COVID cases. That is some fear which we need to allay because of the system in place that we have in Kerala. I don't know, because I'm speaking specifically Kerala primarily because I'm not sure of how it is being implemented in other states. Forgive me for that. I'm not trying to just project that only Kerala is doing that. It's like multiple states, we have all adapted and adopted these things. But the thing is, what I can assure you is that because of this system in place, to smartly differentiate between the COVID and non-COVID population and thereby cater to the needs of the non-COVID population. Once when you decide to continue on these lockdown measures, the healthcare of non-COVID population is also being affected, which is something like chronic illness. You imagine somebody who is taking regular medications for cancer. Okay, imagine a lot of people living by the border districts. Like we happen to being a border district in Wayanad, we happen to have a lot of patients coming for dialysis from Tamil Nadu and even from Karnataka. Okay, like border district, Nilgiri districts, and all these core districts. We happen to cater to a lot of population there. Now, because of this lockdown, they are not able to access our healthcare facilities. Now, what we did is like probably an exemplary thing that we did. What we did was we gave accommodation to the dialysis patients who are coming from Tamil Nadu. We opened up a separate ward for them. Now, because the non-COVID wards, elective surgeries are all postponed in our institution. That is something which we did. So, because of that, we happen to have a lot of other wards which could be opened up for the care of these patients. And with governmental support, with the Kudumbashree systems in place, we could coordinate our Aster volunteer group. We could coordinate actually the ensuring of all this, that these patients from Tamil Nadu who are living in this, virtually living in this, in the wards that we have given them, we are ensuring that they get food 3 times a day. They get all the laundry, all those basic needs are met. So that is something which we are able to provide at this point in time. But once when you impose a very strict lockdown, there are a lot of patients suffering primarily because of chronic ailments like, as I said, cancer, chemotherapy. They have a restrictions in place to attend their regular hospitals. So that is the health in a problem in not in relieving the quarantine. That is something which we need to ponder actually. And the economic impact obviously is huge actually. So
the same amount of care be taken even after this lockdown?
exactly. It's see, the most important thing is the vigilance actually. Everybody need to be vigilant. Everybody need to be educated on the consequences and how rapidly it can spread. After flattening the curve, it needs the effort of only maybe some 4 or 5 people who are not complying with the norms that are suggested by the government. If they don't oblige with these things and mix with the public by contracting the disease, it can lead to a second phase of or a second wave of epidemic in our locality itself. So just achieving a plateau is not going to suffice. So after lockdown, it's like a Herculean task to actually probably eliminate COVID from our setting.
So then based on incubation period, initially it was 14 days. It was actually told. Now then we thought it was 28 days. It was news. So can we now strictly hold on to the 28 days
No,
incubation?
actually, the median incubation period that is specified is around 5 days, and it can extend up to 14 days, and in some cases it has extended up to even 28 to. So we've seen cases where patients have been reported positive after around 28 days. So that's what it varies. It varies a lot, incubation period.
So we cannot like stick on to the 28 days. It
28
may
days.
vary.
It may vary.
Vary.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what.
So again, we expect public support in these changes also. Like they should also cooperate with this. We are also studying about the virus and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are learning new things about the virus. There are probably more than one strains of the virus in circulation. No idea about, like, we don't. it's a new disease, so we don't really know a lot about it.
Yes. So one doubt we have got from Sharat Sajan. He have told, is prophylactic use of chloroquine advisable? Like it have gone in the newspapers and all. It have been told that they could take some chloroquine tablets.
Yeah, actually, even in the ICMR, that is the Indian Council of Medical Research, has advocated that prophylactic use can be tried, but it is only advocated in patients who are in contact with the proven COVID patient, or say healthcare workers who are taking care of such COVID patients. So, but again, the dose that they've prescribed is a very low dose. We're not really sure how much it's going to help. But having said that, it shouldn't give you a false sense of security. You should still take your precautions, you still maintain your social distancing, hand washing. That is still of paramount importance. And if you're taking care of such patients, you can opt for a
So
chloroquine
it's a very
prophylaxis.
tricky question is what I feel, because ICMR has openly advocated that you can take it as a prophylaxis. But now what I feel is like personally it should be based on as Sarah said, it should be based on a risk level basis actually, what risk that you have. And we are the only country to have advocated chloroquine on a very large scale, openly to the public that they can take it. And luckily we have a very good reserve of chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine production in our country. So in that regard, we will be getting huge evidence as to whether it worked or not. Now we have a lot of theories going about. Now this chloroquine, that the most important point should be taking hydroxychloroquine should not be giving you a false sense of assurance. Like somebody in private, like in public, being a public person or somebody should not have that assurance that okay, I have had this contact, now I can start taking hydroxychloroquine and start mingling with the public. If somebody thinks like that, that is like asking for trouble. So you should not have that assurance that okay, once and I am taking, I will be disease free and I am going to get cured and I am not going to get affected. It's not like that. Chloroquine is basically classified. Hydroxychloroquine is an immunomodulating substance which acts and augments the immunity in your cell. Now, latest theory is that hydroxychloroquine prevents the entry of the virus into your cell, so that you may actually prevent the virus from replicating inside your body. That is what the current line of thoughts in scientific world is. The evidence, based on evidence, that is what they are advocating and probably postulating. So with that evidence, should we recommend for everybody? I don't think. I personally I don't advocate taking hydroxychloroquine for everybody, and it should not give a false sense of security that you are going to be safe when you take hydroxychloroquine.
So,
you should assess the risk as well.
So unnecessary intake of chloroquine is not advised. Only if we have come across
You can take expert advice. See, you can. That's why we have a health system in place. You have call centers. You can freely call doctors. We have telemedicine. You feel free to contact and don't self-medicate. You ask a doctor. If he advises, you can very well take. It's not a problem. But a doctor very well knows how to analyze somebody's risk. Somebody may be a heart patient. He has a high risk of developing arrhythmias. Now, this hydroxychloroquine has that risk of an increased arrhythmogenicity. Now, yesterday, incidentally, we had a new article in New England Journal of Medicine saying that hydroxychloroquine group of patients required more time. They had to spend more time in the ventilator with COVID. So, lot of contradictory evidences come. Now, all these international journals like the Lancet and NEJM, they are in a hurry to actually accept articles. So, everything is coming. And now, because of the advent of social media, now we are in live and we have WhatsApp, we have Twitter, we have all these TikToks and all this kind of social media. What they are doing is it's disseminating information on a very huge in a way actually. But the validity of those information also should be challenged. Like you have a lot of good info and you at the same time you have a lot of irrelevant and false information. So you should not be having a false guarantee. Always that the most important thing is seek advanced help. And that is why we have a system in place where you can freely call with your mobile and ask for help. We have a telemedicine facility here. We are always available in order to receive the requirements of the patient. So if at all you have doubt regarding an exposure, just call the helpline center and we can help.
We can always use
Yeah.
that are in front
Just
of us
because
rather
it is
than-
being advocated doesn't mean that you should be self-medicating and having that false sense of guarantee.
So we'll answer one question. It is from Poonam Rao. Why should only people with symptoms get tested? What about the asymptomatic people? Won't they be carriers?
Yeah, that is what we had talked. We chatted about this. Asymptomatic people could be carrying and they could be transmitting the disease. we don't have that level testing kits available in our country to do in that much level of testing in our country. So we are trying to build up infrastructure. We are trying to build up more and more testing facilities. See, initially when I was testing for the medical students who came from Wuhan and all, and the primary testing, the entire state, being we are basically a very small state, and the entire state of 14 districts were sending samples to one district, which is Alleppey. Now we have testing centers in every district. There is no district without a testing center. And we have multiple centers in our district. And I am proud to say that even our Aster MIMS in Calicut, we have an excellent facility for testing in RT-PCR in Calicut in place. So private institutions are being identified by the Indian Council of Medical Research. ICMR is giving certain operational guidelines, and we have certain norms for accepting every college. Now the latest recruitment is we have had a message from the central government saying that every medical college, government and private medical college in India, should be setting up a lab for testing for COVID. Now, once when we reach that level of infrastructure, we will be able to test the asymptomatic people. We are in the process of building and gearing towards the a very worse outcome. We are only in the learning phase actually, and we are trying to build up infrastructure. At this point in time, we can only probably test high risk contacts and somebody with symptoms. In an ideal world, I should be testing everybody with a potential contact. We hope that we'll be reaching such a stage at some point in time.
We can only overcome the step by step.
Yeah. It should be in a graded manner.
So once we get infected with COVID, is there any immunity that is?
That is a very hypothetical situation actually, because it can be proved only by studies. Okay, herd immunity is something which is being discussed on an epidemiological level in terms of whether once when you get COVID, whether you will be immune from it. But there are cases from China where there are a lot of patients who have turned out to be COVID negative and symptom free, and later on they went on to develop another episode. So they have got infected, which itself questions this like whether we'll get immunity. There are cases of reinfection in COVID patients. The initial COVID positive patients happen to develop COVID again later. Whether they were for the second time or whether there was a reactivation of the virus is something which will be proven only at a later time. But they are getting infected, which means that there is no immediate immunity from this. And they even happen to shed the virus in fecal matter even. So we don't know whether they will be continuously shedding the virus also. So whether they are truly negative is something which should also be questioned. Because just because a throat swab is negative, we cannot say that he is virus free or he is relieved of COVID. That is why the most important thing is once when you are COVID negative and discharged from a hospital, you should still spend another at least 14 days in isolation with the potential in a source, in a scope of him being transmitting in his fecal matter, because we could isolate the fecal virus from the fecal matter. We are not routinely doing a RT-PCR of fecal matter. We can never say. So somebody turning COVID negative can be COVID positive 2 weeks later also. So is it providing full immunity? It is not fully immune. But herd immunity is something wherein the virus mutates and goes and takes the form of a less virulent, less strong form of a virus. Now when the virus is less strong, the severity of infection can make is also less strong.
So we can expect a herd immunity.
Yeah, that should be achieved. See, it's not like after 1 month of lockdown or maybe in 2 months we are going to be COVID free and there are no. See, H1N1 outbreak, the swine flu and the bird flu cases are being reported still sporadically. See, don't think that H1N1 is entirely being eliminated or anything. It has become a very common thing, and lot of patients are showing only mild symptoms because the virus is less virulent or less strong right now. But there are certain set of people who even die of H1N1 even nowadays. But we are not bothered. It is not a mainstream or a headline news nowadays. Okay, so at some point in time, we may be reaching that level where we are saying, okay, you are COVID and we don't care whether you are. So that may take time. How much time will it take? We should wait and see.
Actually, one aspect that we have to take care during this lockdown, I think it's a psychological aspect. Like people in lockdown create a sense of confusion and also for some people to accept this. It's actually new to them. So how do we take care of or what are the suggestions you could have on the maintaining the psychological health of?
Well, the state that we are in is it's new for all of us, even for us and for the general population as such. The thing that we have to realize is that there are still even more deadlier diseases. Like there are diseases like tuberculosis claim around 4,000 lives every day. So we have been dealing with such diseases for a while. Only thing that this is a new disease, and so there's no reason to panic as such. You have to be cautious regarding the disease. You have to be aware of the disease, but there's no reason to panic as such. Take the precautions that the government is telling you to do, and follow the necessary steps. That should be enough for now. So yeah, so and the anxiety is a problem that we have to address. But once we are aware of this, and once we are aware of the fact that we probably have to deal with this virus for a while, as Sir said, it might take a while before we see the end of this disease. So once we're aware of that, I think a certain amount of panic will come down.
I think first step we should be accept it. Like
Accept
it will
Yeah,
not.
and
It's not
it's
a.
because it's a new thing, we are having to face a lot of sacrifices as healthcare professionals and as patients. Okay, now there is that social stigma. Okay, this guy was my neighbor. That person was turned out to be COVID positive. Okay, should I be distancing from that person? Should I have that? And even imagine being a COVID patient. Okay, so I have been declared negative, but everybody probably in my neighborhood knows that I was a COVID positive. Now, can I go to a salon and have a haircut? Or can I go to a supermarket
Yes.
once when the lockdown restrictions? It poses a lot of psychological stress actually, and it is affecting a lot of COVID affected population. It is affecting the families of the COVID affected population, and there is a lot of social blame which is being posed. Okay, somebody an expat coming from a where other country with COVID, there is a labeling of him as like he brought COVID from some other country.
Mental
No,
trauma.
it poses a lot of mental trauma, and for that, government has opened up a lot of psychological counseling call centers. Actually, you can even call Disha and the same landline, the toll-free number, and you can connect to a psychological help centers. That was 2 days back that we opened up in our district. Actually, we happened to inaugurate the call center for psychological support.
Yes.
So there is a psychiatrist in place, a team of psychiatrists from our Wayanad district administration, and they are also trying to involve us in that also. So even we are willing to cooperate in making that endeavor a reality, and we want to offer our support to actually help these people. And it involves medical healthcare professionals also, because being in Disha, I once happened to receive a call from a staff nurse working in Pune. She wanted a psychological help, saying that she was afraid because she is staying so far away from the family, and whether she will have a risk of contracting COVID. Healthcare professionals are also human beings. We do have our fears in facing a patient, and we do have that fear that whether when we go home. And initially, I cannot deny, I am being very, very last year. Actually, I even when I started testing, I had that fear whether I would be giving it to my small baby that I have, or whether I would be the reason of my wife contracting the disease or something like that. Fear is everywhere actually. You cannot say somebody who is saying that I don't fear COVID is somebody probably who is lying actually. We have to accept that, and everybody needs support. And sometimes we have an entire team of doctors and emergency medical staff who had to be quarantined. So we are taking a lot of calculated risks here.
Yes.
Now, once when you quarantine, you are put in an isolation room inside the hospital, a separate block, where you are not seeing your parents, not seeing your wife and children. You are away, and you are suffering actually, just because somebody came to you with a potential disease. So we should not have that stigma actually. We have to accept that, and we may need psychological help, and it should not be something embarrassing actually. We should be open towards that. Once when you feel you are being stressed out, now because you cannot regularly approach a psychiatrist for counseling for some depression or something like that, you have to utilize these call center facilities. That should be done, or it should not be going into an irreversible organic disease of depression or something
It
like
is
that.
nothing to be ashamed of. The
There's
psychological
nothing to be
ashamed of.
embarrassed or being ashamed of, exactly.
Yes.
So you should always have an open mind
Yeah.
in and seek help whenever it is necessary.
Yes. Like we should be more. We should say a no to panic, but precaution. We should
Yeah.
take precaution. That's
We should be very vigilant. That was the message initially itself. Don't panic. Be vigilant. You have to be vigilant in dealing with this epidemic.
yes.
We have to be together. We should be holding our hands together, not just literally. We should be together in this. And
Sir, some I think we are running short of time actually, but we'll
Yeah.
just answer some random questions. Like, are homemade masks effective in keeping off the COVID-19 virus?
It's not actually. It's not effective. Homemade cloth masks are not affecting in keeping away COVID. But what it can just do is it can prevent respiratory secretions from going out to a larger distance, and it can give some kind of protection to yourself. And partially it is protecting. Is it protective for you to be in a social gathering? No. If you keep a social distance, is it of some kind of protection? Yes. So if you can actually keep that social distance, and if you prevent from touching all the surfaces, like when you are traveling in some vehicle, or when you actually happen to go to a shop, don't touch the table or all those kind of stands or railings of your stairs or something like that. Once when you take those social distancing measures and adequate hand washing precautions, and if you can maintain a social distance, cloth mask can be protective. But will it definitely protect against COVID? Absolutely no.
Sir, so um, is one question that we have asked is like weather related. Is that like some districts may show a cooler climate? For example, like Wayanad does show a cooler climate. So can the incidence of COVID be reduced, or is there any role
See,
in?
the postulate from WHO is that the virus do not survive for a longer time in a hotter environment. Okay, virus is being inactivated. That is the whole purpose of us reusing the N95 mask after heating and drying. Now the technique is that we are running short of PP. We are finding avenues to even reuse N95 masks. So what we have advocated is heating this mask in a hot air oven for 70 degrees centigrade for 30 minutes. Generally makes it destroys the virus. So virus generally survives lesser in a hotter environment. That is the crux of it. So whether a hotter environment will give you a lot of protection is something which we may have to prove at a later date. But then generally what I can suggest is probably there is some protection based on climatic variations, because the tropical countries, like even the other underdeveloped countries like Africa and all, we are seeing lesser incidents of COVID. It's not that they are not reporting or anything. Maybe healthcare facilities are limited, but there is no there is no aggressive amount of people dying because of COVID or anything. So that tropical belt is somehow protected actually. Even Singapore lies to be close to the equator. So it is having lot of links with China, etc. in the initial period itself. But they were relatively free. They had a very good health policy, obviously. But whether climate is helping us is something which we may need to prove at some day. But my postulate is that probably it is benefiting us.
Yes.
But Wayanad being the coldest district in the entirety of Kerala, we are having fewer cases. So it is not just the climate actually. It is just the entire measures that is taken at a governmental level, and with the private and public partnership and the understanding from us in containing the disease. And with that in mind, the final conclusion should be we should not be panicking, because the observation that I had in our department and various other departments we were having to deal with the next step is what is like many patients with non-COVID are because they think that hospitals are probably hotspot, they are refraining from coming forward and getting themselves admitting in the general wards actually.
So since we are like short of time, we'll answer some common
Yeah.
questions that
Yeah.
like of a common man's, like what would the COVID-19 virus stay alive on food, like refrigerated foods or vegetable?
Could
Should
be
they
potentially, yeah. You can never say never. Formites can survive.
Then another question, actually, this is okay. So I think we are running short of time, and it is time to wind up the session.
Sure.
So thank you so much, doctors, for sparing the time
You're welcome.
in answering all the queries. And okay, so let's hope that we continue the success story in tackling the COVID-19 by saying a yes to precaution and a no to panic. Thank you very much.